My name's Ed Piskor.
I'm Jim Rugg, and I'm very excited for our guest today, Ed. We finally have a designer on the show. He's designed graphics for various skate, comics, music, and fashion companies, exhibitions for Harley Davidson and Nirvana. But the reason that we want to talk to him is because he works at Fantagraphics and he's designed some of the best looking comics and graphic novels I've ever seen. Welcome to the show, Jacob Covey.
Hey, thanks, guys. I've been a big fan of both of you for so long. It's kind of funny that I'm just finally meeting you, Jim. But it's nice to be here.
Well, it's awesome to have you. And I wanted to get started. You know, Jacob, we do a little bit of research on our guests before we have somebody on. And I found an interview where you were describing all of the freelance and work projects that were on your desk. And I'm curious, what is on your desk right now? What kind of stuff are you working on?
Oh, that's a good question. I've actually been trying to keep it a little lighter right now because I have a hot sauce company that I'm trying to expand, Hosa. And right now I'm working on a really big project for Chronicle Books. It's a Dolly Parton book that's actually working with Dolly Parton. So that's kind of a major project with like cool special edition stuff. I can't say what, but it's coming out this November. So we've been doing a big push on doing some tramp literature series for Feral House, which is basically just a bunch of old writers, hobos, and hobo writing. People like Jack Black, if you're familiar with of tramp literature. What else am I working on? I don't know. There's always so much in the queue, and then Fantagraphics is a full load, so I keep busy.
Let's talk about Fantagraphics. I think your title now is creative director.
That sounds right.
Tell us what do you do in that role?
Well, for the longest time I kind of kept that at arm's length because Fanta is an unusual structure, and everybody kind of is such a contributor there. It's really a place where you have to be passionate about what Fanta does to work there, because the pay is not great in publishing generally, but especially in comics publishing. So but more and more it's particularly because right now we're about to do some rebranding of the company. I do feel like I've had to take more of a mantle of kind of taking direction, carving out the direction that we're going with that, and overseeing. There's 4 designers, including me, and 2 production people. So it's still a fairly loose thing because it's not like we get to hire out. So I don't oversee other designers out of house, which is often what an art director or creative director has to do, in publishing at least. But yeah, the big thing right now is just this huge rebrand, because really Fantagraphics, as iconic a company as they are, we've never had any real branding. So it's quite an undertaking.
Gary said that you're also the guy behind kind of revitalizing the website as well. Is this like a pen and paper kind of conceptual thing, or do you do coding as well?
No, I know some, but no, I'm like the last guy in Seattle to know how to work a website. A friend of mine, I said to him, I'm a dinosaur in this town, and he said, no, you're a unicorn. So that was a nice way to say it. But yeah, I'm overseeing the website, but really it's like I'm learning how to use this Figma program to sort of push things around and work with the coder who's doing the real heavy lifting.
Whenever you go into something like this, redesigning Fantagraphics brand or maybe designing it for the first time, what are you thinking? Like, what's the process? Are you addressing a problem? What are you trying to accomplish with the brand redesign for Fantagraphics?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's kind of a total rethinking for Fanta. It's worth saying that, like, I had trouble getting a job at Fanta. I had to pester them for 6 months just to get hired because I was an outsider. They were so used to this insular kind of network of comics people, and they had only just started getting into the book market when I came on, as opposed to the comics market. So, you know, Gary is unique. He's foremost about putting out art and then hoping that it's. So it's kind of this whole rethinking about what it means to be a brand like Fantagraphics. And so all this time we've had this huge cumbersome logo that's Fantagraphics books in a long box that nobody likes to use, so we barely use it. And it's just impractical. So I wanted something that people could rally around, that would be a calling card and a seal of approval. Like when you see it on a book, it's like, oh, I'm calling it the legacy torch. I can't reveal it yet, but so it's being the torchbearers of comics and just owning that we're the best. And that goes hand in hand with their longtime slogan, publisher of the world's greatest cartoonists. So I want something that somebody could actually tattoo if they wanted, something that people would actually care about. And so it's focusing on an icon, and kind of the biggest focus is how it works on the books, because that's what we care about. So that when people pick up a book, they know to take it seriously, even if it's, you know, Johnny Ryan or it's, you know, something more serious. So that's the main goal, really.
That little logo that Klaus put together for Fantagraphics, I forget where it first appeared, probably maybe 20th Century 8-Ball or something, man. But that was like a step in the right direction, man. Like
Are you talking about the shield?
The shield.
Yeah, and that's just it. We've all just kind of glommed onto that, even though it's wildly impractical. I mean, you can't put that on a spine of a book. You can't really use it as a logo. It's more of a, you know, shirt design or something. But yeah, exactly. That's just it. We've had we've got great cartoonists, so we've had people create their own little marks, and some of them we've glommed onto, and some we haven't. But yeah, I hope that we create something that people will like the way, you know, people like the Klaus shield, which is a heavy burden. And I'm usually my biggest critic. So it's saying something that I feel some confidence about it. And just to say, the team of designers, Keely McCarthy, Chelsea, and Justin, all over there, have been a big help on it. So.
You mentioned, Jacob, that you came to Fantagraphics as an outsider. Did you come as a comics fan or more as a book designer that saw an opportunity there? Is your background, did you grow up reading comics?
Well, yeah. I mean, I know you guys know I'm a huge Ninja Turtles fan.
Raphael in particular? Yes,
exactly. And I have a weird obsession with the Ninja Turtles. And I have like all kinds of psychological reasons I believe in those characters. So yeah, you know, but it's funny, you know what? After I got my job at Fanta, you know, a year later or something, I went back to my hometown comic shop in Wenatchee, Washington. And I told him, yeah, I'm working at Fantagraphics now. And he's like, oh, what's that? So that's my background. Like, people didn't know art comics. It wasn't, so, you know, Ninja Turtles was like the closest thing to art comics that I knew. And, you know, but at that point I had, you know, some Fanta books and things, but really I'm just like, I'm a visual person, you know, I'm drawn to art and to books. I worked as a page while I was a design student, and I would, you know, library page is basically a lackey at the library. So I would like load up the cart to return books to the shelves, and I would take the longest time because I'd just be looking at every book as I put it back. I put like 5 of them down on the bottom of the cart and take it back and take those to the photocopier and photocopy the fronts and backs of the covers to kind of learn from it, you know, creating my own little morgue files. So, you know, I was really all about publishing, but Kim, it was mostly Kim, I think. Kim Thompson didn't know really what to do with me. because they just weren't used to, like, I showed them all these skate graphics and things like this, and they're like, well, that's not comics. And, you know, because I was doing, well, like skateboards. But what was relevant about this was, like, I got into production stuff. So it's a silkscreen skateboard, but with glow in the dark ink, so that it would glow in the dark. And at that time, and still, I don't know of any time that people had used glow in the dark ink on skateboards, but that's what I wanted to bring to Fantagraphics, was upping that production bar, which I know you guys appreciate.
We bonded over the love of Glenn E. Friedman's photography, and I remember you said that taking rock photos early on was a part of your creative output.
Yeah, totally. Because I actually became a photographer, loosely speaking, taking photos for a monthly magazine up in Bellingham where I was going to school. And I thought that was the only creative job that existed. I didn't know what a graphic designer was. I'm pretty much a hick from the sticks, and didn't know that was a thing. So, like, Glenn Friedman was a huge inspiration, Charles Peterson. And so I was doing photography while I was going to design school, and then to college, and I figured out I wanted to study graphic design. But because of all that music scene, that's kind of where I came up. I was, you know, going to school, working in the library, going out at night, shooting bands, and just, again, keeping really busy. But the first design work I did kind of defined who I am now, because what ended up happening is the venues where I would shoot photos, I got hired to do flyers. So I transitioned into doing flyers for them. You know, I kind of joke that me and my friend Tyler were the last two people to be paid to make flyers for shows, because that's not really a thing anymore. It's, you know, all online. I mean, mostly. But yeah. And actually recently I got to work in, do I have that? So I did this book on the secret history of science fiction and fantasy for Abrams. And I managed to work in one of my old photos from the old days into the story, because I happened to be talking about At the Drive-In, this band that I had photographed when they were nascent.
Let's talk about a little bit of your early work at Fantagraphics. So I think your first book was 2004. Does that sound about right? Whenever you join up with them, and it's like pinup art of Jack Cole.
Oh, wow. What? How do you know that? It's embarrassing. Yeah.
Do you have some favorites on your checklist? Some stuff that you have good memories of, or anecdotes of books that you designed, or, you know, even artists that maybe going into the project you didn't know and you came out of it with like a new favorite artist? Anything from that early period you remember?
Oh man, yeah. You know, I don't like that pinup book. Although it led to a bunch of other pinup books that I was proud of what I brought to the table on those. I ended up as co-author. But you know, the early stuff that I think about where it really defined things was, you know, things like the Popeye series. I think it's kind of a platonic ideal of a Popeye book. Getting to work with Gay and Wilson, and actually setting up photos too. I don't know if you can see it, but the Gay and Wilson book it's like I got to take a Gay and Wilson joke and make it into a photo, and well, I'm afraid to take it down, but anyway, I won't take it down. But I used a plexiglass back on the board, and I wanted Gahan to draw one of himself pressed up against the glass that would run on the backs of the books. And he's like, I don't get it. Like, people won't understand. I'm like, well, it's one of your drawings. He's like, you know, I'm like, this 80-year-old to actually get himself pressed up against glass and take photos. And I'm like, yeah, I want to, yeah, let's do it. But I didn't see it as a drawing. It had to be a photo. So getting to have Seth Kushner there and take photos of Gahan was pretty epic. Another funny thing about that is Gahan told me I had a funny name. I don't know if that was just his shtick. I said, but your name is, yeah, but that was my mother's name. I don't know what that means.
One of the books that really spoke to me early on and kind of put you on my radar to some extent was the Fletcher Hanks stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I remember that being kind of a revelation, and then finding, you would write about the design process. I think you used to have a blog about it. And it just struck me as being a different way to present comics, especially, something that's like this older golden age comic. It really felt different, and it felt like that was a big influence. Did you get a sense of that whenever you, I mean, that's some exciting comics material.
Stuff is incredible. I mean, it's mad. I'm kind of curious how you saw that as a different way to present things. I have thoughts about it, but do you have?
Yeah, you're probably not the only person doing this, but it's when reprints started to happen, and some people would clean up those reprints, or they would recolor them. They would maybe take out the yellowing from the pages. There were these different ways of like how to present this. And it just struck me that yours it had a real integrity to the original printed pieces. You kept some of that artifacts, that texture. They felt old, even though it was in a really nice book, that I'm holding. It felt true to like, I'm looking at a comic that exists. Like this is a historical artifact, and you get a sense of it. I think Chip Kidd, and when he would photograph old comics, achieved a similar result, and it's probably the time frame might be similar there. But it felt like you were reprinting a comic as opposed to updating it or recoloring it or changing it somehow for a new presentation. It felt like the history was important in that reproduction.
No, that's cool to hear, and I like hearing your thoughts on these production aspects. Yeah, I mean, that was just it. That used to be a huge discussion we would have all the time about how to present the material in a way that made sense to the material. It kept the integrity, but it hopefully drew in new audiences at the same time. So yeah, that was always a big part of that. Was I couldn't stand when you could see a lot of times people will blow out the page to get rid of the aged paper, and that just makes things look like shit. So it was a slow learning process about how to bring up the levels on the background, or select around the panels, and basically try to keep the integrity of the art without so one thing that some people, Chip Kidd is really, he's really into the sort of the nostalgia aspect, right? And he gets Jeff Spear to do those gorgeous photos of material, but those, it's like he did that in the Peanuts book that he did too, where it was sort of presented as artifact and as reading material. And it's totally cool, but you can't do that and so you have to find that balance about what is the integrity of, and why are you doing what you're doing. And with Fletcher Hanks, I really wanted to keep those candy colors that he has. They're so much a part of the work and the childlike, craft that he has, that that was really important to keep. And then packaging it with the minimalism of the front cover just kind of made it stand out as, truly something different. But this wasn't just another, reprint that's getting churned out. So I really liked that approach. I like the collected version too, with the big face on the front, and it's just very aggressive.
Coated paper in the collected version, if memory serves.
What's that?
Coated paper stock in the collected version.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
such minutia that we're getting into with this piece, but
It's a design conversation.
I preferred the original 2 volumes without the coated paper. So now that I have you here, this was an elaborate setup to grill you on this particular choice.
Oh, don't think I don't have people like you in mind when I make these decisions. I know I'm going to hear about it. You know, like it's so for one thing, we already did it on the uncoated paper. I felt like it really should be on uncoated paper, but it lost the vibrancy. And again, once we do a hardcover collection, it's sort of like it's already proven itself in the market. If you're really into that production, then, you know, get the earlier versions. But like this just makes it, really emphasizes that price of the colors, the saturation of the colors, because uncoated paper, as you know, reduces the saturation levels. So I think that's a more accurate way to put the work out there. But since we'd already done it, I wanted to take this risk. And I really enjoy reading it on the coated paper, which I think I've literally done 2 books that I knew should be on uncoated paper, on coated paper, because of like reasons related to the art itself. The other one was the Jaime Hernandez studio edition, which I'm surprised I didn't get more grief from people about that one. But Jaime's work is so flawless, and those studio editions, the only problem is you have to invest in really high quality paper to not lose all the little brushwork and stuff if you're going to do uncoated paper, you know, because it just soaks up the inks. And that's just not realistic. We don't, you know, and I never see any publisher who does use high quality paper for those types of books. So to me, it was worth it to use coated paper on the Jaime book so that you didn't lose the nuance of how flawless his work is, so that you could really see, here's some white out, here's like how the black goes, you know, the wash goes, it's a little light, just because he is such a master. I think that was the only way to really appreciate the originals.
Have you designed all of the studio editions that Fantagraphics has put out?
No, Keeley's done some. And frankly, a lot of the time the artists are doing them themselves. Ed's was probably the most involved one. Well, Klaus's was, but Klaus is a designer basically, so he did most of the work. But yeah, several of us anyway do that. I do a lot of production consultation kind of stuff on those.
I thought one of the great innovations in those studio editions that you guys are doing, because I love the artist editions. You know, Ed and I talk about them, I think, every episode in some way or other. But one of the things you did, yes, yeah, exactly, yeah, we look up when we say artist edition, we're looking up to God. But you introduced sort of that margin around the art. You know, the Jaime Hernandez one is a good example because it's very pronounced and clear. Ed's artist edition has that same kind of margin, and I think it's very flattering to the original art. And as much as I love the artist editions, I'm excited by the idea that like they can be pushed a little bit further. You know, there's still innovations to be applied to that concept. And so those were a couple that I think of with your studio editions that I think, you know, makes the presentation better.
Yeah, I mean, because they're not meant to be read, really. So I don't want to lose even the marginalia, you know, like if you have any bleed at all, you're going to lose some information, some little nugget. And these are for obsessive people, right? They're not for just like casual readers. So you want to get all the information. I want it to be like you're looking at the original in a museum, you know? But yeah, I mean, like what I haven't seen done is a Jeff Spear presentation of a studio edition, basically one of those Chip Kidd, the light scraping across the paper edition. I'd love to see that, but you know, it's not in the budget for us.
It would be great for like a Dave McKean, you know, like the Sandman covers or something like that. You know, something that has a little bit of a sculptural quality, or maybe a lot in his case.
You're dead on with the McKean thing.
You mentioned, you know, Dan Clowes being a designer. And I, you know, I agree with you. I think before comics really got to the more of the book market, the books lived or died on the Cartoonist. You know, I think Dan Clowes' collections would look good. Obviously, Chris Ware's collections would look good. Any cartoonists that you think of as being good, noteworthy designers?
well, Jordan Crane immediately comes to mind, of course. I mean, there are good. So you're opening a can of worms that I might piss some people off.
You don't have to name bad ones. I
No,
just
no,
wonder
no.
if there are any favorites, anybody you've pulled in influences, from.
Um, Gosh, I'm no shade at all. I'm just, my memory is not the best memory, so I'm not immediately thinking of things. But the can of worms that it opens up is that there's this strange divide because there's two professions that are obsessed with image and type, and that's cartoonist and graphic designer. I mean, there are arguably others, but so those two people working closely, it's interesting to see. Like, I don't think I'm a cartoonist. I'm not sure why so many cartoonists need to be designers, and that's not dissing them. Like, I want people to own their work. I want them, like, I love the culture of cartoonists, being auteurs who develop the entire look of what they do. But there is a way that that I think some of that has to be let go in the commercial sphere. And the reality is all books are essentially commercial sphere. But as far as like people who do a really great job of it, I mean, there are a lot, and I'm just not thinking of who to call out.
What are some of the pet peeves that the cartoonist designer does that that sort of get under your skin or whatever?
Well, like, it's not even like you have to be some master designer, but 9 times out of 10, people will just slap a title over a piece of art that they're attached to, and that is what I avoid in everything I do. Like, 90% of the time, if I put a bar to get the type to sit on top of an image, then I've failed, right? If it's just a title over an image that's doesn't inspire any feeling, then it's a failure. So it's not so much that there are specific pet peeves that come to mind, but I obsess about books and the experiential part of books, and like, I want it to have an emotional reaction. And I know cartoonists want that too, so it's not like I'm saying they don't. But there is a way that, like, one reason I'm drawn to you two guys so much is that you really care about all the minutia of things. So you do obsess about that stuff. But not everybody does, and it happens that I do. I really enjoy collaborations with, like, Stephen Weissman comes to mind. There are people who really want to collaborate and develop what's going on with their look. They have their own ideas, we work around their ideas, but we flesh it out, and that to me is really satisfying. I mean, because again, I'm working with, like, the world's greatest cartoonists, right?
Do you think about storytelling in terms of design?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I mean, that's just it. There's a through line, right? I mean, like, a book opens, it's just like a film, so you want pacing, and you want, in a perfect world, there's highs and lows to the reading experience. Like, even with the Dolly book that I'm doing, like, I'm trying to figure out the right pacing. I can't change the order of the material, but I can change the impact of, when you go from this page to this page, is this image full bleed? Is it, modest? I want there to be these ebbs and flows, and like, more design flourishes here and less here. And so definitely, even with, it's harder with graphic novels because they're self-contained units for the most part. But I want there to be something in the typography choices that echoes back to something in the material, or image choices are really, that's a big topic. But yeah, I mean, it is storytelling, even the way that you present storytelling. I mean, when I do a fiction book cover, prose book cover, there, like every designer will come up with a different solution for what the face of that book looks like. So you kind of have to develop a framework around which what's your priority. And for me, there's definitely an impact. Like the designers I'm influenced by are bold, flat designers for the most part. And that's part of my poster background, and having developed my design sensibilities working only with flyers, where I have one color, black on white or pink or whatever, but one color. And how do you create impact with that versus the noise of a wall of information? And it's the same thing for books in bookstores. Is I want to figure out how you make that stand out from everything else, and it's usually a bold type of solution. I don't tend to be too quiet.
Do you think about the scale? How many people buy now online, so they're just looking at your bold solution, but it's the size of a thumbnail.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. It's the same thing for posters. It's this whole idea of designing for a postage stamp. But for me, the thing is, like, a poster is more like a postage stamp. But specifically because of what you're saying with online, you have to design it so that it is a postage stamp. But then when somebody gets up close to it, there's a payoff. Like there's some reward for looking closer, because I consider it a micro and macro effect. So when it's small, it reads well, but hopefully there's something about coming in closer, and sometimes that's literally just like more detail, or something, or it's just textures and things like that. But there's some payoff. For me is the perfect book cover, and you always have to think about that small scale, large scale effect.
Jacob, when I was last up there in Seattle, you guys were in the midst, crunch time, working on the complete 8-ball, and it seemed like everybody was pulling their last hairs out of their head trying to match up paper stocks, all of that stuff. There's a lot of back end production stuff that went into making that thing the beautiful 2-volume edition that it is. And I wonder if that was one of the most complicated Fantagraphics projects, and two, just to hear some general story about putting that collection together.
Right. Yeah, you're right. It's Klaus. I mean, Chris Ware would also do elaborate stuff back in the day. But yeah, it's the Klaus projects, because Klaus's studio edition was also a real bear, because we had imitation ruby lith in that one. I can't say I have a lot of stories about that, because I think, if I remember right, that was also happening when I was moving and things. And so it was like really disjointed, which added to the frustration. Keeley did most of the production work on that one. But yeah, there's a lot of moving parts trying to imitate make sure the covers are on cover stock, and the interiors are on paper stock that matches that. And then it's basically like you bound all these comic books together, old school style. So yeah, a lot of moving parts. And Klaus is awesome. Klaus is really great. He has such a holistic view of his material and what he does, contrasted with other legends like the Hernandez brothers. They don't have a lot of vision about what they need. What they care about is their stories. And Jaime in particular is just like, those stories are everything. And he has a little more. He cares more about what his book covers look like than I think Gilbert does. I think Gilbert is just such a crazy machine of output that he just cares about what his next story is going to be and stuff. Not just, but.
I want to talk process in a minute, but before we shift to that, you talk about minutia and kind of thinking about these small details. How much power does book design have, do you think, on an average reader?
I like that question. Huh. Yeah, I've thought about that because I get discouraged sometimes when I see that the best-selling, books have predictable design and predictable production. And, a lot of comics, since we're comics focused here, I'll try to just focus on that. Most publishers are just churning out on the same paper stocks and the same, bells and whistles, if any, for the production. And they're the highest selling books, and they have a formula, and they literally have the same trim size for all their books because that's what's most cost effective at the printer and shipping and all of this, and bookstore display. And Fantagraphics doesn't limit that. Like, we don't think about trim size and that kind of thing. Like, the cost is what the cost is within, obviously there's a lot of logistics that we work out to make it financially possible. But so I don't know, sometimes I wonder about it. I know that Fantagraphics has become much more influential as we've upped the production and taken that stuff more seriously. I feel like I don't know. I know that for me and my soul, like, I want art to look like people care about it. So that's why we do what we do. And a lot of publishers put out stuff that honestly, it doesn't necessarily look like anybody cared that much about it. And it's not, and who knows, where that breakdown occurs. But man, I'm going to be thinking about that specifically for a while now, I think.
I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I feel like I tell myself that to combat the OCD of, wrestling with page number design or some element like that.
Right.
So hopefully that's not a bad idea to plant in your head for a little bit. But
No,
let's talk a little bit about process. Do you work primarily with Eric Reynolds and Gary Groff? Do they come to you and say, this is the book, or this is... You tell me how it works.
Yeah. How does it work? So within Fantagraphics, how it works is... because with freelance stuff, it's a very different experience because out of house and in house has different dynamics. Like, out of house, I'm generally hired for my specific aesthetics and vision and things.
Ooh, how would you describe your specific aesthetic and vision?
Oh boy. I don't know. I'm not good at being succinct about that. Like I say, I think I like bold covers, but that isn't to say I like crass covers. Like, I don't want things to just hit you over the head for the sake of hitting you over the head, but I want them to grab the person they're meant to grab. Every book is not for every person. And I go into projects trying to figure out why this book is for which person. And so there's that. But anyway, your question more specifically before was, how does the process work? It really depends. Most of what Fanta does is comics, but, Gary sort of relentlessly brings on books that are not comics. So maybe I should just focus on the comics part. It depends on the cartoonist a great deal. Some people are just looking for production to be done on their books. And Gary is pretty accommodating of, if they want hands off, then we're pretty hands off. I try to insinuate myself into things where I think I can improve. Like, I see what a cartoonist wants and maybe I can improve it. I try to go there. I work with Gary and Eric. They're the primary editors of books. And they, bring me in once they've signed a book and say, here's what the book is. And then I basically have to educate myself on it and, read it, figure out what it's all about. And again, it varies wildly because, some people have a really solid aesthetic and nothing needs to be messed with. And they design their own covers and all of this. Maybe they need some help with some typesetting, that kind of thing. Other people, well, like, what comes to mind? Like, these are two very different projects, right? You've got Disney's Mickey Mouse Adventures, Greatest Adventures, you know, very commercial driven book. And then you've got this, you know, much rougher aesthetic art book from Eve Gilbert. And, you know, with her, I was able to say, well, her work is so dense that, I don't know if you want me holding these up, but
yeah, that's fine.
But her work is so dense that I wanted to pull it out into there's the narrator, and then there's the comics themselves. And so she was really open-minded about it. And I was able to introduce kind of a weird color scheme of this intense orange and sort of army green, well, not army green, but green to sort of insinuate the jungles and things. There's an intensity to this book that is amped up by the color choices. So that was an example where she was really open-minded about how we present her work differently. And then, you know, with Mickey Mouse, what does a Mickey Mouse book look like? Hopefully we can make the most, you know, attractive, unexpected Mickey Mouse book, right? So it's still very commercial, but it doesn't look like what people expect. And so hopefully we can bring new readers into Mickey Mouse, because that Floyd Gottfredson stuff, and in particular, is just, it's gorgeous cartooning. But, you know, most of us don't care about Mickey Mouse because it's just a product at this point. So yeah, the process is just very different depending on the project and who's involved.
And you're thinking commercially in some of these cases, like the Mickey Mouse example you just gave, you know, obviously a cover or a design, part of it is to, as you say, speak to that particular reader. So that's, you know, right, part of the concern, I guess, from the beginning.
Right. Yeah, I mean, some books are, I mean, very few of Fanta's books are specifically commercially driven, but they have commercial potential. And so finding that balance, because again, it's just who is the audience, and how can you sell the most copies, and, you know, basically reach the most people, or whatever that is.
I remember we talked to Jeff Smith a long time ago, and he talked about how from the cover out, that's the publisher, that's their domain. You know, he gets to do everything between the covers, but that's part of theirs. You know, that's part of the, I guess, the sales portion of it.
Right.
I don't know that every cartoonist will recognize that or say that.
Right.
Working closely with cartoonists, you know, I always think cartoonists have a certain personality type, and it's not the most social or the best team players in my experience.
Right.
Is that a difficult thing to navigate whenever you're working with a cartoonist? You know, if you're working back and forth, how does that go?
Well, I mean, I'm fairly hermetic myself, so I relate to it. You know, I'm social. I like to engage with people, but so I kind of respect where they come from, and I have such immense respect for cartoonists. I think it's the most insane thing in the world to draw a graphic novel. It's the return on investment of the labor involved is crazy, and it's fantastic. So I mean, I go into it with a respect for what's going on, so I think that helps. I think I sort of lost the thread of what your question was.
I was hoping for you to dish on some stories of things that went wrong.
Okay, yeah, well, that's where it's really hard to say, you know, call names out and things, but there are definitely cartoonists who are the most difficult people on earth. Like, I don't encounter the level of disrespect that they're able to dish out in other spheres. I mean, that's not totally true. It might be who we choose, because I'm totally fine calling out, oh God, I'm going to insult him by even forgetting his name. The Laura Warholic, Thoreau, the prose book we did, Laura Warholic, he hated my covers so much, full of vitriol. And for some reason, Gary felt like he should forward that to me. So this just, he hated the book cover so much, and Gary was so on board the cover, and everybody except Thoreau loved the cover, that it actually became an impasse, and we never published the paperback edition of the book because like Thoreau was just such a creep about it. There are cartoonists who reject things because literally the universe told them it's not the right cover.
I feel like we could guess who that cartoonist might be.
I'm just having flashbacks. Like whenever I would go out there, I'd spend a week sometimes, and I go into the office and I would just work on my own shit. But I would work where the production people are doing their thing. I would work across from Keeley, and
right.
Some of the other people that would be there, man. And the emails that would come in, like you could just tell everybody's like pulling their hair out with this person or that person, because just it's and you know what? It's almost like, as a cartoonist, we've dealt with that art director who can't verbalize what it is they want from us.
Right.
Oh, now that's interesting. I want to hear more about that.
So that's like, it seems like whenever I was out there it was a reverse of roles, where the cartoonist could not articulate the design aspects that they wanted for the book. They'll tell you when it's right kind of energy is what I got from all of those interactions.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. There is a way, at times I know I'm failing at my job if I can't say what I'm looking for. And I do think that's a breakdown. But a lot of cartoonists, I don't know if do I experience them? Yeah, because there's a cartoonist who always wants to work with me, or used to always want to work with me, and there's a cartoonist who would go into every project saying how open-minded they are to whatever, and literally every single time I've worked with him, it's ended up back at what he had for an idea, and I contribute nothing. And that type of thing is really frustrating. I mean, I think there has to be a good faith effort on the part of the cartoonist to actually be open to ideas. There are cartoonists who I frankly, I'm sad. I'm sad that they never have a book that looks like what I envision for them, not because I'm like a gift to them, but because every cover they put out is like unremarkable. It's just like, there's another one, and but the material inside is amazing. But if you don't figure out how to reach that audience, what's the point? And it just breaks my heart, because they're, again, cartoonists fucking toil. They work so hard. And so at the very end, at the finish line, to just stumble and put it out there. And I mean, so many books are coming out into the world every day. Like, why should anybody care about your book? So you've got to differentiate. You've got to make it clear why this book matters. And it breaks my heart when that happens.
One of the big...
I feel like there's a game for viewers at home to play, is to trying to match up
the
Fantagraphics cartoonist with
who?
These descriptions.
Okay, yes. Jacob said he. Put these ones down. Okay. But I was just going to say, like, coming into the game, going to conventions, meeting my heroes, one of the big sort of shocks to the system, they're your heroes, and you think that they should be, sitting on mountaintop mansions or something like that. And then it just takes a conversation to realize, like, they're their own worst enemy. They're stepping over themselves, man, and fucking up their whole, like, there's a glass ceiling. They can't penetrate it. They can't see it. So it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen by accident. That's a bummer. And that is a part of the cartoonist mentality.
Yeah, I think even the language you use, Jacob, about the person that shows up and says they're open-minded to whatever, there are almost like these phrases.
That's a little doth protesteth too much.
Totally. And Ed, to your point, the cartoonist that you think like, wow, this person's skilled, but they don't sell well, it's almost predictable what they're going to be like when you meet them.
That's true.
Because they do have that problem of not being able to get out of their own way.
That's true.
Right. Well, I'm sitting here thinking, God, even by me talking in vague terms, a bunch of really good cartoonists that I enjoy working with are going to be sitting there going, "Is he talking about me?"
Oh, totally. We're all so neurotic. Like it's all about me. Every negative thing you said was about me.
Gary's good at fostering that as well, man. Just keeping you a little nervous all the time.
Oh God, yeah, that's true. That's true. He does seem to have a talent for it. I think he enjoys people being uncomfortable.
Well, this is a good segue then. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about Gary Groth. I mean, he's a huge figure in comics history and is somebody that works, with him, maybe closely. Any good Gary Groth stories?
Um, um, yeah, no, I definitely work closely with Gary. I work on more of his books than anybody. Um, I mean, what you said is totally true. I mean, it's so. I've worked at other jobs, the skate company and stuff like that, and they ostensibly were cool jobs, but I was miserable because I didn't respect the boss. And one of the things that works so well with Fanta is like I really respect Gary's worldview on things. I don't agree with him about everything, but I respect that he's full of integrity. He had a vision, and he actually pushed an entire industry towards that vision. But as far as like good stories, it's like Gary's Gary. You go shoot appliances in the forest with him, and he blows things up on July 4th, and like literally blows things up. I think I said this before. I don't have the best memory. I don't have a great memory, so I don't have any like great Gary Groth stories. I'm sorry to disappoint.
Can we flip it and talk Kim Thompson a little bit? He's a guy like Jim and I got into the good graces of Fantagraphics towards the tail end. I only spoke with the man 2 times in my life, and the first time was when I was like 14, 15, and he just dunked on me here at the Pittsburgh Comic Con. But never really met the man, never got to know him so well, and anything you could tell us about him.
Oh man, I miss Kim. Kim was game. Like he was like, Gary doesn't contribute too many ideas to what a book should look like. I mean, he just stays out of the way, and he has a million things to keep track of. But Kim was so precise in everything. Like he was always right there on the surface. Like he was one of the most transparent people that I've ever known. And he could come off really harsh, dunking on you. But it was just who he was. But him and Gary, man, they used to, I mean, it was uncomfortable being on email threads with them. They would just rip each other apart. Like, it was like witnessing your parents fighting in the worst way, with like breaking dishes over each other's heads. It was so rough. Like Eric and I have talked about how uncomfortable it would make us, and they just were totally unself-conscious about it. And they were so used to the abuse that it didn't affect a damn thing. It was just like it was brutal. And I'm surprised that Gary's been able to function without that outlet. He did remarkably well getting by, and he doesn't take out that abuse on any of us.
Any specific examples of what they would disagree about?
Oh, stupid stuff. They'd fight about Dilbert, or like, you'd be talking about a project, and all of a sudden, Kim's like, well, actually, Dilbert's a great comic. Scott Adams is just a creep. And then Gary, just have a really huge diss on Kim's judgment, and then Kim would attack Gary, and it would just like, so it would devolve into like but it would always be, well, it would mostly be comics related, or it would be about movies. And I mean, it was inconsequential most of the time, but it was just like, that's when they would really take out anger at each other.
When Gary gets really mad, the adjectives that he uses are you can't pronounce them. Like that's his move, to be like, I'm smarter than you.
What was it? He knows more words than anyone. And when we did that Charles Rodriguez book, the scrofulous cartoons of Charles Rodriguez, every one of us is like, Gary, what the hell does that mean? Nobody wants to buy a book called The Scrofula. He's like, no, actually, and he gave us the definition. It was like so perfect. It was like insanely right on, because it's like a gagging response to something. I can't even remember, but it was like, oh shit, you're right. That's amazing. We'll go Scrofulous.
Did you work on the Guy Pillart, the that Jodelle book? Was that one of the books you designed?
Yeah. So that was a sad thing, because that was one of Kim's last projects, and everybody hated everybody by the end of that one. The estate was difficult, and that book just didn't turn out. We all had so much hope for that book. It's amazing material. It's such a weird Barbarella movie as a comic book. We thought it was going to do really well, but man, it went through like 3 designers in-house. Like, I quit. That's literally the only book I think there was one other that I had some big issue with, but I think that's the only one I quit. I was just like, there's no point. I can't do any more here. And so I think Tony Yong took it over, and possibly someone else was on it. But anyway, what was your question? It was really bad.
I just wondered if that was one of your books, because I actually think that book is extraordinary, and maybe it's the material that I'm responding to more than the design. I suppose it's possible, but in my mind, like I find that book to be really beautiful.
Yeah, well, we certainly tried to do the right production on it, so I think that's the case. It's just, I don't even remember. It was a nightmare. Like, Kim felt bad, Kim felt angry. Like, it was just unfortunate, because it was kind of one of his babies. Because Kim spoke something like 7 languages. I mean, that's why we were doing all this translated work when nobody else was, because he could do it. But yeah, so yeah, I'm sure that he was the communicator. I mean, he was always communicating with the foreign. Like you'd be working at your desk, and you'd all of a sudden hear Kim Thompson, who was kind of your classic nerd comic guy, but he was so just so smart, and all of a sudden you hear him speaking Dutch, and all of a sudden, or French, and it's just like, it was always jarring to hear him just transition into all these different languages.
Another book that was foreign material that I think is a beautiful book that you did, Mort Cinder. Do you want to talk a little bit about that book? Your thoughts on the cartoonist or on the book itself?
Yeah, I like that Mort Cinder stuff. That was a really difficult book, because it was installments originally, and so we had a lot of production discussion about that book. I won't get into the minutiae, because it's boring even by our standards, but he's masterful. It's incredible work, and so we really went back and forth on how to do the production right. We labored over that. And then, as far as how to package this material that hasn't been in print, he's Argentinian, and the work hasn't been in print, and he was a political cartoonist, not a political cartoonist, but he was a cartoonist making political work in a dangerous regime. And so his backstory is really fascinating, but the material itself is just the way he works is like collage and perfect drawings, and just like, it's so wild that I can't believe he's able to contain it. So anyway, as far as production stuff, there was just a lot to figure out how to best show his work, because a lot of the originals are destroyed or don't have access to, and that kind of thing. But like, that's an example of a series book. I'm of the mind that, when you talk about the complete Peanuts, yeah, it should look like a series. But when you get into the complete works of Brescia or something, then it doesn't it doesn't make sense to make it a series. You want each book to be its own discrete object because the stories are wildly different. I mean, one is Dracula. So that was a time where I really wanted to figure out what works best for the material. And that's an example of everybody was not on board my decision, but they trusted my judgment. And then once it came in, everybody was really down with it. Because that one has like this padded case. So it's kind of squishy.
Yeah, almost like a Bible, like a
Yeah,
leather, maybe not leather, but the way like a nice Bible cover
Yeah.
would feel.
Yeah, exactly. And I almost didn't pull the trigger on that because I was like, I started to doubt myself because of all the negative responses to it. But that's just exactly what I was going for. It was like a Bible feel, like something that had significance, because this is also a resurrection story, because the main character is constantly dying and coming back to life. So it was sort of a Jesus nod, I guess. But yeah, with the foil stamping and all of this, I wanted it to be elevated. I wanted people to wonder why it looked important, you know.
It also has that feel, it's such a tactile choice.
Yeah.
When you actually see that book in a bookshop and pick it up, it has such a distinct feeling.
Right, and that gets into like every little detail, you know. That one has a bookmark too, I think, so that's the Bible thing too. But like one thing that I feel really strongly about is I want all of our books to default to round backs instead of square backs. And I don't know if you'd even notice this, but like this, that's a square back. See how absolutely square it is?
Mm-hmm.
When it sits in the hand, you know, I think about how I want it to fit my hand. So I like a round back. If you see that, it's a little softer, a little rounder, sits in the hand more comfortably, no hard edges. So like on the Mickey Mouse book, I don't remember my thinking on that. I think frankly that was just that the quote didn't quote for round back. But usually I reserve a square back for something where there's a reason that the severity matters, or that it needs to look like an old encyclopedia or something, you know. Like to me, that those types of details are really important.
Whenever we're putting our comics together and you work on page one, you have to have some idea of what the format is off the bat, or else you're going to be playing catch up or whatever.
Right.
Do you have the guys, or the people in house, call for quotes and get you all the, like, do you do your whimsy when it comes to designing a book, or do you work closely with the production person to get all the quotes in tandem with doing your design work? Like, how does that work? Like, the budget for production,
Right.
and all of that stuff.
There's like a mathematical formula, percentage wise, about whatever the quote comes back as. If it's under a certain amount, then we're good. Under 11%, or I don't know what it is, I don't know. Then we're good. So if it's under that, and I'm like, well, then could we also add this? Then that might change what I do for the design and things. Christine is the person at the office who gets the quotes. I work through her. I used to work more directly with printers, but it is more convenient having her be kind of a production manager.
The part that comes with her job too is every printer calls the material something different sometimes. The different kinds of paper stocks and the case
Totally.
wraps and shit. And you would see, like, in the office, there would be these 3-ring binders of just all the papers and all the different card stocks for the covers and all that shit. And I can't imagine you having to have all that shit in your house or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's hard to track, and she's got a good organizational brain, and she's awesome. And yeah, that's just it. It's like every printer has different capabilities. They can only bind books up to a certain size, so we might have to go somewhere else because the book's too large. or, you know, that drives it out of budget. I mean, some printers have like 12 foils and they're all gold, you know, and another printer has a rainbow spectrum of foils. So yeah, there's just a lot of logistics to figure out. And like I say, it can really change how you design a book. And the way Fantagraphics works is different than most publishers. Most publishers, the book is done and then it's solicited. We solicit books before anybody's even begun to look at the material. So everything is on a very accelerated pace, like quick decision making, and just not the ability to, frankly, there's not a way often to sort of predict where you're going to end up. Like, I'm going to design this cover and assume I'm going to be able to use foil. And if I can't, maybe I'll use this other design. You know, so it just depends on how that goes.
So you're very, you make these books, you're print oriented, I guess, but I'm sure that requires a lot of digital technology to produce.
Yeah.
Was that something you learned in school in terms of like the digital stuff? I think I'm a couple years older than you, and I had design classes where it was like the digital part was up to us to pick up, and it was much more kind of theory. So I'm curious about your relationship with digital, and we'll start with that.
Yeah, no, I hope I'm not boring you with this, but so I don't think I could do my job pre-digital. I'm not, like, I've always drawn, but I draw badly. Like, I don't know that I could do what I do if it wasn't for a computer. That said, I do a lot of analog stuff. Like, you know, well, I happen to have this right here. Like, I did an Elmore Leonard cover, and, you know, I printed out, I don't know if you can see this, but it's 2 sheets of paper all cut up. And that's how I designed the book. I wanted it to be a little unpredictable. Like, I couldn't do that in a computer in an unpredictable fashion, but I needed a computer in order to do that, you know? I like you guys, I love analog. I love hand-touched things. And I always wrestle with this balance of being careful not to be too nostalgic and masturbatory about, you know, gimmicky about effects and about how things are produced and putting fake distress on things. But at the same time, fake distress has an evocative quality, and, you know, if it's done well, then cool. But, you know, you guys, you analyze how that stuff is done in a way that I do too, where, like, I analyze it to figure out, can I make it look authentic instead of cheesy, you know? And so it's really important to get that balance and to really understand the analog side of things. And that's where I'm a dinosaur, because, like, I just care so much about print that's just where my heart is. That's what I want to do. And but it's really fun to see, like, how you can introduce those hand elements. You guys appreciate this too. I had this stuff in my closet here. I stole this yard sale sign. Do you see this?
Yeah.
Do you see what this person did? They're insane. They cut stencils and spray painted a bunch of these yard sale signs. And die cut, you know, hand cut an arrow.
That's street art, man.
Yeah.
I love that you call it die cut.
Yeah, I know. This wasn't even in Seattle. This was out in Astoria, in rural Oregon. So, like, that wasn't somebody trying to be cool. That was just, like, what they did. I love it.
Well, my next part of that question then is, you know, how much do you think about the digital quality of what you're making? Is that something that is part of your process in terms of, you know, here's the digital edition of this book that you designed?
Oh, you mean like actual, like, e-reader type?
Yeah.
Books? Yeah, you know, I would like to think more about that. I would like, I mean, in my freelance life, I don't have a lot of people having me think in those terms, so I don't there. Fantagraphics doesn't really prioritize that. And, between that and, just my busy life, I don't get into the weeds on that as much as I would like. I still find it so limiting what you can do for ebooks that, it's, I just keep waiting for technology to catch up or something, because I just don't think you can do interesting things. You can't even control what the reader does with type. They'll make the type larger or smaller. And, that's a whole, you know, hundreds of years of typesetting just thrown out the window. Like, because when I typeset a book, I'm thinking about how many, where the lines are breaking, and, all of this stuff that just is gone, And so right now, not a lot. And I would love to do that more, because I've actually gotten more into reading on my iPad lately, because I read late at night. Yeah, I just don't see the technology really being there. And part of it is, everybody's using a different platform, and they're not using there needs to be a core program being used or something. I don't know.
A minute ago we talked about how printers will use different language to describe, similar papers and things. I find I teach a digital short story class, and even the language to describe like what is a page, if it's going to be displayed on an iPad, there's no concept of a spread. It's all these different ideas, and I think a book it's a technology that was really good at delivering a chunk of organized information, but it's now not necessarily the best technology for delivering a chunk of organized information. And I don't know, I've been making more e-zines, and they're really fun because it's not limited by budget. It can be as many pages or screens as I want. It can be full color. It can even change, size from page to page. And it's just, from a zine making point of view, it's kind of fun and liberating. So like you, I've been reading more on my iPad, and whatever resistance I had to that, it's much less than it used to be, despite loving print and all the qualities that, that come with print.
I'm totally with you. I'm excited to hear that you're doing that. I mean, I think it's a kind of a Wild West too. It's
totally. And I like that part.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's just like, I don't have the time to dedicate to learning that part, since my job is books. But I would like to see Fanta push into that direction more and experiment with that, because I think you're right. I mean, I believe in the book from just a soulful place. And it's important, and physical copies of things are important, but yeah, it's a better technology to deliver stories digitally. And we're seeing that with, the Black Lives movement. Even like I'm seeing where I didn't realize media had bias built into it, because here in Seattle, we're having a shitstorm, and I'm watching this guy, Omari Salisbury, down on the streets, and he's just literally at the front lines using his phone to document things. And it's not about how high quality it is or anything. It's about like, oh, that's a genuine witnessing moment. And I think the same thing is true with, doing electronic books or zines, where, that could be more important than, that you have some physical thing for all of history.
So I could see it with Fantagraphics. They do some of those really awesome, like small print pieces that'll be like equivalent of a mini comic or a zine that you get whenever you order something on their store. It'll be like the extra that comes with it. I could see that being an application for their digital, as you're going forward with the redesign. Also almost like as the preview for these books, rather than like, here's the first 12 pages as a PDF, almost like here's this unique PDF that really captures what this book is, or showcases the best of it, or creates an experience that you want to see this PDF on your iPad, on a nice colorful screen. Jacob, in the course of talking to you, you mentioned you're this a hick, I believe was a word you used early on. I identify with that. I grew up in a rural area, in a mountainous rural area, and hick was certainly a word that was thrown around. Were books something that were special to you as you were growing up? Was that when did books become like a thing that you're focused on?
Oh yeah, like that's an interesting question. I mean, I think it was escapism. I think, I had one of these childhoods where I was on my own a lot, and my earliest drawings were copying, Garfield strips and stuff. And, doing a lot of reading was just escape. And my biggest heroes were authors. My first fan letters were to Beverly Cleary, Bill Watterson. And I heard back from both of them, and that was really cool. I mean, you guys know Watterson didn't respond to a lot, so he answered 3 of my questions. It's really cool. But yeah, I mean, I think everybody has a certain media that they get attached to early, right? And I mean, some people just love movies, they love books, they love music, and I was really into music too. But yeah, books were a bit of an escape, and it wasn't something my family was. Well, my parents were kind of readers. They'd read, not heady stuff or whatever, but when I say I'm a hick, it's like my extended family was really from the sticks and scary. so yeah, my dad's hobby was he had a mine. And so he'd drag us up to the mine every weekend and just leave us, me and my brother, to just roam around on little mini bikes that he had built. I think that's part of my Ninja Turtle fixation too. This idea of, these outsider brothers that are on their own and, the bonding of that.
That's amazing. I don't know anybody who has a mine as a hobby. It's so wild. Although not out of place with again, like where we grew up here in southwestern PA, there's a lot of mining. We have mine subsidizing and insurance and stuff under a lot of houses in this area because of the prevalence of mining everywhere.
Yeah, man. Not 1 year goes by without a house around here caving in. Jacob, when I was out there last time, they just received another like dummy of a complete Peanuts volume that Seth designed and everything. And I was astonished that as a designer, it looks like a Seth thing, but I didn't realize that he was just so analog with it.
Right. Yeah. And to varying degrees, we still have analog artists, like Gilbert still sends in a stack of original art that we have to scan. It's like, 300 pages of original Gilbert art. Yeah. Paul Baresh is this crazy, what's the word?
Well,
brownie.
It's nocturnal, that's for sure.
He's a brownie. There's an old mythological brownie that comes in the night and fixes people's shoes and doesn't want, acknowledgement or something. And not that he doesn't want acknowledgement, but he comes in and he just he's this whirlwind, he takes care of everything. And so he handles a lot of the production of people that send in things that have to be translated into InDesign. And then usually, one of the designers touches things up and whatever. But yeah, there's still a handful of them. In this stack that I have handy, I thought you guys would be interested in. Unfortunately, I don't have it, but like Jaime would send in a photocopy. And unfortunately, I don't have the version. Well, he says we'll send color. I don't know if he does it still or not, because Paul's gotten his coloring down pretty good, but he would literally takes colored pencils and colors in everything and then draws these cryptic old codes for color that none of us actually even know what they mean. Like literally, I don't think any of us know. And it's just that we guess like, oh, he means this red that he likes to use. And then, I've got stuff like this from Jason, where he literally sketched out how he wanted the cover to look. And I was able to get this from him. I mean, a lot of this stuff just went in the trash. But I was able to ask him if I could have this one. Yeah, it's just kind of amazing to just see how he would draw his drawings that he'd already made, but he got into massive detail on it.
What else do you have in that pile that you thought you might be showing us? Give us a little show and tell there.
I wish I had more because I couldn't go to the office. I don't have much. I've got my old Ninja Turtle blue line wash. Yeah.
What comic is that from? The
I think
movie adaptation?
no, I think this is God, I forget.
Show it off to us. I'll be able to tell if it's from that original series. Say a word real quick so that the camera goes on you.
Oh, yeah. Here I am.
Can't tell.
Well, it's signed by Levine, Talbot, Eastman, and Brown.
You know what that is? I bet that's from the first comics stuff.
I was thinking it was from like the first dozen issues. I can't remember at the moment. This is the one where they're climbing down the building, going floor by floor down the building. I'm forgetting what that is.
I bet that is that first comics collections, because First Comics would put out those color, like the color graphic novel collections. That I think it was like 3 or 4 issues or something in a square bound book, and they were in color. And I bet that's what it's from.
Yeah. Can you tell what the medium is that they use to color that?
It looks to me to be. It seems like gouache or something.
Yeah, it seemed fairly opaque, but still had a. You could see the
Yeah.
brush.
Yeah, I think it's gouache. But yeah, I don't have much else that I was able to pull out, unfortunately. I wanted to show you the Love and Rockets cover where they cut out ruby lith in like, I've never seen another thing like it. It's like 4 layers of cyan, 4 layers of magenta, 4 layers of yellow, and then the black. So it's got like 12 layers of ruby lith. And it's just such a mathematical formula and like such a organized mind. I could never imagine coloring things that way.
Were they like one sheet was 25% cyan, one was 50%, one was 75, one was 100. That's amazing, man. That's, Ed and I have both done that retro color look using palettes built on that 25% gradations, but cutting out like 12 screens worth to to create that physically.
I don't know how you do that because it's all red.
Right.
It's not like you can go, okay, that's the blue, so I can envision that. No, it's like that's just tons of layers of red, and to know how to mix those colors so well, it's just mind bending.
I always think that with Richard Corbin, because I think I would hear that he would like airbrush onto those separations where it's like now you're really like you're outside of the math formula, and it's just. Right. I don't know, intuitively guessing that, that looks like 25%. That should blend into an orange.
Interesting, too, that it was ruby lith, because another big piece of the puzzle when it comes to the actual separations is when you're stacking up the 25% screens, you could create a moire if you stack like the cyan one on top of the magenta one in a unpleasing fashion, so like that's like an extra level of work that had to be done presumably by the person at the print house who is doing that. And we've seen the letters printed in the big Fantagraphics oral history book, the letters that Gary and Kim have sent to those people for fucking up, man. So now you're like really creating like the fucking Hellraiser cube for the guy at the print house, man, to just try to, who's quaking in his boots because he doesn't want another letter from Kim Thompson calling him a Cro-Magnon and shit like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm good, Jimmy.
Yeah, me too. Jacob, have we forgotten anything?
No, I just went a lot longer than I expected. I hope people will endure it. I really appreciate it.
Endure it? You mean you hope people will enjoy it?
Yeah. That's what I meant.
And I know people will enjoy it, man, because that's what the channel's built upon, man.
Where should people find more of your work? Where's a good place to follow you online?
I'm hit and miss on it, but I'm on Instagram more than anything. I think I'm at Jacob Covey with 2 B's and 2 Y's. And Unflown is my design studio, so unflown.com.
And we should say that's a nice resource for people watching at home that are interested in design, because you annotate some of that stuff. You talk about materials. There's some notes on, it's not just portfolio, but also some insight into what we're looking at, what we're seeing, and some of your thought process behind those choices. Yeah,
I appreciate that. I need to, find time to update it because it's not exactly working correctly. But yeah, there's that. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my hot sauce company. So. Yes. because I do weirdly have a hot sauce company. But here's the part that would interest you guys is we're actually starting to produce our first artist editions. So Simon Hanselman is doing a custom screen printed bottle for us with his art. So, check out Hosa Sauce, HOSA sauce.com. That's going to happen in about a month.
That's awesome. And we should say there's, behind your left shoulder, we can see that HOSA logo.
Yes.
You sent us some bottles of that stuff, and tonight is a night where I have to go grocery shopping. I'm going to be making tacos specifically to test that out.
Nice. Perfect. I'm pretty proud of that sauce. I think my partner Andy Beer has made something magical. So I love it. And I love bringing this, like, it feels like a culmination of my skills learned in other fields. And I'm kind of excited to bring that to something as mundane as a hot sauce. So it's a fun project.
You're all over it too. There's amazing production values, and you could just when you hold it, you can tell it's like there's so much consideration that went into just the design.
But see, that's what's exciting about design. I don't know why people can't get joy from mundane things. And like now, if it was garbage hot sauce, I'd feel guilty. But it's actually really high quality. But like, it's so to the hot sauce like you would treat an emblem or something. Like, what's the new release, and so each label has its own kind of character and stuff, like to things, so that people can kind of just sit with it and feel like some, I don't know, hopefully some attachment to it, because I have a lot of attachment to it.
Where do people get the hot sauce?
That's at hosasauce.com.
Cool.
And all around, the sort of upper Northwest here. But anyway.
Those links will be in the description of the video below. I'm good if you're good, Jimmy.
I am. Thank you very much, Jacob. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, totally. Thank you guys. And keep up the minutia. I love it.